Human Rights Day is observed every year on the 10th of December, the day that the United Nations General Assembly adopted in 1948 the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a milestone document that proclaims the inalienable rights which everyone is entitled to as a human being, regardless of race, color, religion, sex, language, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. More on this topic we have on the phone Eman from the UNHCR, the Donor Relations Associate at Kuwait. Hello, Eman. Can you please tell us what does this day resemble to humanity each year?
Hello and good evening. First, I would like to start by thanking you for joining the efforts of the United Nations in marking the Human Rights Day 2020. Of course, the Human Rights Day is a universal reaffirmation of the importance of preserving and advancing the human rights worldwide. It's a day that shows us the importance of the human rights, and it is and its cruciality in advancing our efforts as a human being.
Eman AlEinawi, can you please tell us about the theme for this year's Human Rights Day?
Absolutely. The theme of the Human Rights Day 2020 is Recover Better, Stand Up for Human Rights. If we're tackling the first section, Recover Better, it's of course related to the COVID-19 outbreak. We know that the COVID-19 outbreak affected all sectors in our life. So it is a call to show the importance of placing the human rights at the center of our rebuilding efforts, as we're now slowly and hopefully entering the recovery and rebuilding phase. It is crucial to keep in mind that human rights should be placed at the very center of our efforts. The second part of the theme, Stand Up for Human Rights, is a call of action for everyone, for all humanities, from all sectors, to actually stand up for human rights, defend human rights, and call for granting human rights to everyone, preserving the human rights of everyone.
And were there any implications imposed by COVID-19 for the pursuit of human rights, especially this year, knowing that the pandemic has gone throughout 2020?
Unfortunately and sadly, yes. As highlighted earlier, the COVID-19 outbreak has affected all aspects of our lives, including the pursuit and advancement of human rights. It contributed to deepening poverty, to rising inequalities, and it added to structural and entrenched discrimination and added to the gaps in human rights protection. As we're talking now, there are over 80 million refugees and internally displaced individuals around the world who are vulnerable. So the COVID-19 outbreak added to their vulnerability. It affected their right to enter countries. So countries closed their borders. It affected their right to seek asylum. It affected their right to actually have a proper education. And let's not forget the protracted refugee situations in some of the camps that unfortunately raised the risk of spreading the COVID-19 between the most vulnerable populations. And as we're talking now, more than half of the 18 million individuals are women and children. So we're talking about adding more vulnerability to their vulnerable status initially.
Eman, before we get back to the news, can you, as we all know that the state of Kuwait is titled as the Global Humanitarian Center, can you please highlight to us briefly the impact of the Kuwaiti support on preserving the human rights of the vulnerable populations?
My honor actually to be speaking this topic. We know that the state of Kuwait has strongly earned its title in 2014 when it was designated as the Global Humanitarian Center by the Secretary General. Talking about this topic, it's not only relevant to the generous financial contributions that the state of Kuwait has provided that aided millions and millions of vulnerable populations around the world, regardless of their race or religion or where they're from. So the Kuwaiti contributions has reached different countries around the globe. But it's also worth noting that the state of Kuwait contribution to preserving the human rights was also evident during its non-permanent membership of the United Nations Security Council during 2018-2019, during which the state of Kuwait has placed great attention, and it was on top of its priority list to tackle the human rights files and preserving the human rights of in countries, namely Syria, Yemen, Iraq, Myanmar. And it's all the Kuwaiti efforts were also evident during the outbreak of COVID-19. We've seen that Kuwait was always amongst the first Arab countries to respond and to provide aid to the World Humanitarian Organization, to provide support for the vulnerable populations in countries where the health situation was critical.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was Eman AlEinawi, the Donor Relations Associate at the UNHCR Kuwait. Thank you so much, Eman, for joining us today.